Guilty Pleasures, Volume 3, written by Joyce, McCarthy, read by Itsy Bitsy Book Bits. Chapter 1, Hooker. Our semester examination had finished about a week ago when Bob invited me for a sleepover at his place. His parents were away, and he had the huge bungalow almost to himself for 3 whole days, not to forget the refrigerator stocked with his dad's collection of single malt. "Papa won't mind if he sees a few bottles emptied in his absence," Bob declared. "We share a drink or two every Saturday in any case." "Some boys are born lucky," I muttered under my breath. When I turned up at his place late Saturday evening, Bob had already laid out the drinks and ordered pizzas to go with them. As he made drinks for us, I found him frequently checking his watch. "What's the matter, Bob? Are we waiting for someone?" I finally asked him. Bob looked at me with a sparkle in his eyes. "Have patience, my boy. It shouldn't be too long before you figure out," he said in an almost conspirational tone. By the time I finished my 3rd drink, my curiosity had taken the better of me. "Who the fuck are we expecting, Bob? It's already past 11. "About time," Bob smiled as he put his glass down on the low glass table in front of us. He stood up and looked at me. "Brad, let me show you to your room. It's upstairs. You can change if you want to." I was carrying a change of clothes in a bag. I had no idea what was going on. "But I thought you said we were expecting someone." "Well, not one, but 2 very special guests." Bob winked and then went on. "Thanks to George." I knew George. He was Bob's elder cousin and the one who always pampered us with imported cigarettes, whiskey, and nights out in the best discos in town. We all loved George. He was the one we always turned to for all the good things in life. I didn't ask any more questions and made my way upstairs following Bob. He showed me to my room. "I'll change, too. Be comfortable, Brad. Our guests will be here any time now." Having said this, Bob departed. By the time I stripped down to my boxers, the whiskey had started working and I was horny as hell. I felt my burning, throbbing erection in my hand over my boxers and thought about all the girls I would love to be with in that room at that moment. That was when I heard the doorbell, followed by the sound of Bob nearly running down the stairs. I heard him open the door. I heard him talking, and then I heard several pairs of feet going up the stairs, mostly the clatter of heels. An impatient knock at the door, and almost immediately a second, "Brad, open up. What's taking you so long?" I heard Bob almost screaming at the other side of the door. "Have you gone to sleep or what?" I opened the door in my shorts, and I saw a girl, around 20, curvaceous, long-haired, smiling at me. Bob was standing next to her. With compliments from George, he winked and burst into laughter, seeing the confusion on my face. "All yours, Brad, for the night. Please show some manners and invite our guests in." "I need to be with the guests in my room." He winked again and turned around, heading towards his room at the other end of the passage. "Hi, I'm Betsy," the girl said as she walked into my room. I stood behind her, watching her tight-ass shuffle in her pink skirt as I closed the door. I'm Brad," I mumbled. "Hi, Brad," Betsy smiled. She stood at an arm's length facing me. As she bent down to remove her shoes, she offered me an eyeful of her breasts. They were almost spilling out of her dangerously low-cut white top. As I stared at her fleshy globes, I couldn't help but lick my lips, which had gone dry. At that moment, my cock had sprung to a firm erection. Betsy looked at me with her large eyes. Her eyes dropped to the obvious bulge in my shorts, and she said simply, "Oh, I see. Don't worry, Brad, that will be taken care of." She winked. What'll be taken care of?" I managed to ask. Your erection," Betsy said without batting an eyelid, pointing at my cock. She settled on the sofa and crossed her legs. The full length of her long thighs down to the curve of her butt came into view. "Do you have a girlfriend, Brad?" Betsy asked, looking straight into my eyes. That made my heart skip several beats. "Well, not really. No one's steady, you know." "Oh, poor you. Must be so difficult for you, isn't it?" I didn't know what to say. I had never been with a hooker before, and I had no idea how I was supposed to go about the business. I could smell her inside the closed room, a heady cocktail of musky perfume and womanly smell, and the blood rushed to my groin. She made the first move, standing up and walking to the desk, her shapely hips swaying in a rhythm. She stood by the desk and turned her head around to cast an inviting glance at me. I walked up to her and put my hand on her back and stroked it. It was damp with sweat, and my fingers brushed over the clasp of her bra. I moved a bit closer behind her. Putting my hands on her upper arm, I leaned forward and kissed her neck. A hiss escaped from her lips. I kissed her neck again and took a deep breath, smelling her hair. I moved my hands up and down her arms as I pressed behind her, my bulge now pressed against her ass. My hand slipped around her waist. I pressed my erection harder into the cushion of her ass as she thrust herself back at me. I kissed up and down her neck again slowly. My hand stroked her hip and the other moved up to feel her breast, teasing the tight cleavage with my fingertips. Hearing her moan, I whispered into her ear, "You seem to be loving this," as the tip of my tongue teased her earlobe. She shuddered and cast her head down as my hand moved around her waist. My other hand fondled her breast. She shuddered again. Her breathing got heavier as she pressed her ass back against my cock. Reaching around to her front, my fingers found themselves rubbing her lips. Her skirt was so thin that I could easily feel the contours of her pussy. My fingers parted her folds and I began to rub vigorously. The fabric was fragile to such an extent that I could only imagine her panty being even more delicate, perhaps made of lace. The thought took over my mind, and the desire to know what lurked behind her skirt forced my dick to stiffen unlike never before. I kissed her between the shoulder blades. I pulled her top up over her head. Her hair looked wild now. Forcing my hand down under the waistband of her skirt, under the panties beneath, I pressed my fingers into her very hot, hairy pussy. "You're very wet," I said, rubbing my fingers along the slippery crease of her cunt. "Wet and hot," she whispered back. "What else do you expect?" She sighed and turned around, trying to push me away playfully. I grabbed her by the hair and kissed her lips passionately. I let my hands roam freely over her firm ass and beautiful breasts as we kissed, our tongues wrestling with each other. "Wow," she groaned as I moved my mouth down to her exposed chest, licking a path towards her cleavage. Grabbing her shoulders, my nails dug into her skin. I forced her to turn away from me, my nails digging deeper, causing marks. Leaning forward, she bent over the desk and pushed her ass backwards as she folded her arms on the top of the desk and rested her head on them. She made no move as I eased her elastic waistband over her rounded butt and down her shapely legs. I stared at the white-laced panties. The panties had ridden up into her butt crack. I moved my hand along the smooth cheek of her butt and pushed my fingers down under the crotch of her panties to her pussy. She groaned as my fingers teased her slit and brushed over her stiff clit, jutting between the folds. "Suck me, finger me, and suck me," Betsy almost ordered in a husky voice. I knelt beside her and kissed her butt cheek before rolling the wet panties down to her feet. The crotch of her panties was so wet that I had to peel them off her crack. I saw her pussy between her thighs now in all its glory. She parted her legs as I dipped the tip of my index finger into her pussy with her damp curly pubic hair and dark red mouth, and breathed in her sweat and her juice. I pulled her ass slightly open and teased the other center of pleasure. I caressed her clit with my fingers, or I licked her, tasting her tangy juices that seemed to almost drip from her. "Oh," she moaned, "finger me, please." My fingers soon joined my mouth at her pussy. As I slid one, then two fingers in and out of her, my tongue lapped up the juices that flowed out of her. After maybe 5 minutes of this, she groaned, and her knees shook so hard, I instantly grabbed her legs to steady her. She came up with a shudder. I held onto her legs tightly as I sucked and licked every drop of juice up that I could. All this time, as I licked and sucked, the tip of my nose had brushed against her anus. On several occasions, my tongue had licked her from clit to rear hole, causing her to groan with intent pleasure. I stood up and moved behind her, lowering my boxer shorts. I said as I aimed my bloated cock head at her pussy from behind, "I need this so badly now." I shoved in hard and deep. Her pussy sucked me with ease as she moaned. I took hold of her hips and began to pound away, sending my cock in and out of her. The sound of my balls slapping against her taint, our moaning and panting filled the air. I threw my head back and groaned as I felt her pussy grip and squeeze me. I gritted my teeth and fucked her harder. I could see the beads of sweat break out on her back as she shouted, "Tear my pussy apart, you fucker. Fuck me hard, you son of a bitch. Fuck me." Betsy's voice raised with every command, and I wondered if Bob and the girl with him could hear us, and that made me hornier. I slapped her ass hard and ordered her to be quiet. She whimpered. She was groaning and moaning at the same time. Her eyes were drenched with desire. I came before I wanted to, filling her up with my thick, creamy load. We were drenched in sweat, our hair matted to our foreheads. I pulled her into the shower with me, sucking and squeezing her soapy wet breasts with ecstasy. I finally had her nipples between my lips, and I sucked them mercilessly. I made Betsy kneel in front of me in the shower and rubbed lots of soap between her plump breasts. Then, as she pushed my cock between her 2 mounds of flesh, my dick leaped to attention, and I thrust in between her breasts incessantly, something I had wanted to do for so long. I toyed with her nipple as she squeezed her breast tight around my cock. When I was throbbing again, she pushed me out of the shower back into the room, and then she came out completely naked and walked over to me smiling. I watched her breasts, full and heavy, wobble as she walked. Her hips swung seductively as she came over to me. She knelt in front of me and stroked my hard cock. Very good. Looks like you are ready for some more fun. Watching her stroke my cock, I moaned, and then she took me inside her mouth, inch by inch, till her lips touched the base. The liquid warmth of her mouth was driving me mad all over again. I could see her head bobbing back and forth as she took me all the way down to the back of her throat, the tip of her tongue on the tip of my cock. I could feel the sperm boiling inside me. I pulled her up to her feet, turned her around, and made her bend over, her hands on my bed and her smooth, firm ass right in front of me. The shock seeped in. She knew what to do and adjusted her position, swaying her hips at me provocatively. I slapped her ass, rubbing my finger along the slit of her pussy, and said, "I'm falling in love with this ass, and I'm going to tear your lovely pussy open. You love my ass, don't you? You can't seem to have enough of it, always taking me from the back." Betsy giggled. I moved close in behind her, taking my burning cock in her hand, and I pressed the pre-cum smeared head into her pussy. "Oh, fuck," I cried out as I felt the sizzling heat of her pussy swallow my throbbing shaft right up to my balls. Taking firm hold of her hips and looking down at where my body pressed against her ass, I began to pump hard and fast. "Fuck, fuck, fuck," she moaned. "Faster, faster." I was too gone to listen to anything. I just watched my cock piston in and out of her in a brutal rhythm as I pleasured her rare hole with a finger. I saw her butt glistening with sweat and heard her moan and squeals of pleasure as I rammed my cock over and over again into her wet, hot cunt. I felt the sperm erupt from my balls and quickly pulled my cock out, holding it in my hand. I pressed my body hard against her sweating ass, my balls pressed against her pussy as I shot a string of pearly white cum high over her back. Several more followed in quick succession until I finally stepped back. Betsy finally got up and kissed me. "You know what? You've exhausted me." Not everybody does that to Betsy. She showered again and dressed. I watched her as I lay naked on the bed. She turned towards me and said with a smile, "Boys like you make my work fun, you know." As she headed for the door, for a moment, jealousy took hold, thinking about the next man she was going to be with for the rest of the night.